Hello and welcome to another episode of the Under the Dome podcast. I'm Ben Belden, your host. I'll talk about that here in just a second. On the other line, I have Nate Urbach, who's here to talk about some official visits that are coming into Georgia, or coming into South Bend for the Georgia game here on Saturday, and some official visits from this past week against Temple. So obviously, Nate, the place that I want to start is the guys that are coming in against Georgia because I don't know, just seems kind of like a big deal to me. I mean, obviously, you've got this SEC team coming in, and obviously that means that a lot of people are going to want to come to campus. Obviously, the whole idea of a night game, Saturday night game, makes it, gives these recruits the opportunity to make the trip to South Bend when they're coming from all parts of the globe. So it's going to be a big night on the football field, and also, I guess you could kind of say in the stands on the sidelines as far as who's going to be there on their official visits. So let's start there, and then and then we can backtrack a little bit to some of the guys that were there at Temple and what they've been doing and what's exciting about that. So, starting off, who's coming to this Georgia game that people should keep an eye on?
Yeah, good talking to you, Ben, by the way. I mean, I know we talk on a regular basis, but it's always good to chat via podcast first and foremost. But yeah, so it's going to be one of those games that has a lot of recruits in the sense that, every game, like even for Notre Dame purposes, for home games, you'll definitely get four to five official visitors or at least unofficial visitors every week. But there's this is one of those games that hits like that 30-40 mark when it comes to unofficial visitors and official visitors all together. I'll start kind of with the commits that are supposed to be in attendance. So you'll have Derek Allen, of course, the safety commit from Georgia, Ovi Agufo, outside linebacker from Michigan, Jack Lamb, California linebacker, George Takis, tight end from Florida, Micah Jones, the 6'5" wide receiver from Illinois. Both 2019 commits are going to be in attendance, Jacob Lacey and Cade McNamara. It looks like there's some conflicting reports on whether John Dirksen is going to be there, the offensive lineman from Ohio, but I know Scout has him as listed on there, so I'm just going to go with that for now. And then, of course, Marquise Stepp from Indiana, Cole Mabry, and Matt Bauer are all supposed to be in attendance. So you can kind of see that it's most of the Notre Dame commits from the 2018 and 2019 classes will be in attendance. And I think the only one that's making his official visit for the game is Jack Lamb. And all the other ones are just kind of coming on that unofficial basis, and we don't know if they're actually going to make official visits later on in the year.
So which of these guys maybe that aren't necessarily commits that are coming might be close and might be, I don't know, leaning in the direction of Notre Dame, and a good game, prime time against Georgia might sway them in that official direction?
Yeah, so the official visitors that are coming that are obviously non commits and just targets. There's a wide receiver from Etowanda High School in California. His name is Gordon Porter. Tall guy, like 6'2", 6'3", but he's a speedster. He also runs track, and I think just last week he had like 275 all-purpose yards and 4 touchdowns in his game, which broke, I think, an Etowanda High School's record. So he'll be in attendance. He's probably the one guy that I would say could pull the trigger this weekend if the opportunity arose. But I don't think anybody's necessarily on commit watch. But he's definitely the guy to look for if that were to happen. Jamari Sawyer from Georgia, Pace Academy, good friends with Derek Allen and some of the other commits. This will be his 4th time on campus, and he'll be on his official visit. It was always kind of seen as a Georgia-Clemson battle with him, but there are a lot of people inside of kind of the Notre Dame circle that believe that if it's not Georgia, it's probably going to be Notre Dame at this point. So, like I said, fourth time on campus for him, so there's obviously legitimate interest there. So he's a 5-star offensive guard, so he's definitely a pull. And Harry Hiestand has a big influence on him at the moment. Some other guys to kind of run through that are on official visits. Julius Irvin from California. He's probably the top safety target outside of Houston Griffith for the staff. They really want him. He's sort of in the mold of a Derek Allen. He's a little bit smaller at this point weight-wise, so he could possibly play that free safety spot. But this will be his first time on campus, and looks like a Washington commit, or not a commit, but a Washington kid at the moment. But Notre Dame's probably running like second or third in this recruitment, and this could really kind of bolster them with him. Chase Cota is a familiar name with many of Notre Dame fans. He was at the opening with some of the recruits, and he was also at the blue and gold game. So he'll be in attendance. He's an Oregon legacy. His dad played there. But an interesting kind of nugget with him is Brian Polian's dad drafted his dad when he played in the NFL. So there's a little connection there, and he has actually spoken about that in the past. So a lot of people kind of look at Notre Dame as a dark horse in terms of his recruitment. So if he goes anywhere that's not on the West Coast, I think Notre Dame has a good shot with him. I know there's a kid, Avanta Krim. I think he goes by BJ Krim. He was supposed to be in attendance. It looks like that Hurricane Irma is going to prevent him from coming. That kind of just came out in the last 10 minutes or so. And he was a kid that doesn't have a Notre Dame offer yet, and he was pretty convinced that he was going to get that offer while in attendance this weekend. So he's obviously not going to be able to get that, but it looks like Mike Elko is very high on him, even though he's kind of in the 1000s in terms of recruit status at the moment. But he's definitely a kid to look out for here in the coming weeks. He'll probably reschedule his visit.
So as a guy that follows recruiting pretty closely, I got to ask, because I really don't know the answer, like how important are these official visits? How far do these official visits go where, they're coming for a big game against Georgia? And you talked about BJ Krim. I saw that he posted on Twitter that he was rescheduling his official visit to the October 21st game against USC. And that in and of itself obviously is a big game as well. So when these recruits come into these big game, I don't know, healthy atmosphere type situations, how far do you think that goes as far as like swaying where they're going to end up going to school? And keeping in mind also that, it's not only the University of Notre Dame that they're coming at for, a big game, but when they come to Notre Dame, they get in front of the dome and they're going to see like all of the new renovations and things. How far do you think that plays in, their decision-making process?
Yeah, so I think there's two ways to look at it. I mean, the one way to look at it is a lot of these kids seem to have, like, for example, Jamari Sawyer, like some people believe that his top two schools are Georgia and Notre Dame. So not only does he get to see Notre Dame at their place, but he gets to watch Georgia kind of play on the road. So there's that factor. And I guess I can probably add a third factor in there. I think the main factor is wanting to see Notre Dame play a quality opponent, and the atmosphere of that quality opponent is only going to be higher than if they're playing, Miami of Ohio, for example. So you're not going to see as many kids going to see Miami of Ohio because most of them assume Notre Dame will win that game and win it pretty easily. So they want to see the quality of opponent, and then the atmosphere is going to be that much higher. The second one, and this one I don't necessarily believe as much. I don't think kids just take official visits to take official visits. I mean, you obviously probably have that occasionally. But any kid coming to Notre Dame on an official visit, I think, has some serious interest. Now, whether or not that interest dies down or, accumulates into a commit later down the road or, signing on National Signing Day, that's a different story. But, but that kind of goes back to the whole idea of wanting to see a quality opponent. So, like, whether or not they're a huge target for Notre Dame necessarily, or going to end up in Notre Dame's class, it's still the appeal of watching two traditional powerhouses play in a very traditional stadium. I mean, why wouldn't you want to go see a game at Notre Dame, even if you're not a Notre Dame fan? And then that kind of just brings the other idea that I mentioned that, you don't want to see an unquality opponent as well. So you're going to see more kids, and that's why you see more of the unofficials too. So like I know a kid like Kalen Gervin, former Notre Dame commit, he's going to be there this weekend, but he's not taking it as his official visit. He's actually going to go on his official visit on the USC weekend. But he wants to be there for the game. And I think that speaks volumes as well. I mean, if kids are going to go on multiple visits to the same school, I mean, that usually means good things.
Okay, all right. So transitioning a little bit to who was here for the Temple game. Talk to me about some guys that were there, and if there are any rumblings as far as headway that Notre Dame is making in getting some of these kids who aren't committed yet to commit, or what the commits were there and why they were there and that type of thing.
Yeah. So the three official visits were Thomas Booker, who's obviously a longtime
Notre Dame target from the Baltimore area. You had Kyler Gordon, the corner out of Washington, who looks like kind of like a Washington lean at the moment, but Notre Dame's certainly in that top group right after that. And then you also had Joseph Asai, who is a weak side defensive end, like in the Dalen Hayes mold from Texas, and he was sort of seen as a Texas A&M or Texas kid, but definitely someone of Notre Dame caliber in the sense of academics. He's a deeply devout Catholic, so there was definitely some pull there, and it looks like Notre Dame kind of came away this weekend higher up with all three of them than they were going in. I mean, Thomas Booker has kind of had this Stanford Notre Dame battle going on for a long time, and it used to, kind of be known as if Stanford offered, he was going to go to Stanford, but now it's sort of kind of trending the other way, and many people think he's going to end up in Notre Dame's class when it's all said and done. Same thing, like I said, with Osai, is, people sort of saw him as a Texas A&M kid, and then possibly Texas if he didn't go there, but now there are some rumblings that it might be 50-50 between Texas A&M and Notre Dame, and then Texas is running third. And then with Kyler Gordon, I still think that my gut would tell me Washington's the school he goes to, but he's sort of like Chase Cota. I think if he leaves the West Coast, it's going to be for Notre Dame. And then there was one other kid there. I mean, a kid that's familiar to most Notre Dame fans, Paul Moala. He was on an unofficial visit. He's a safety from Penn High School, which is like 10 minutes away from Notre Dame. He's just kind of weird. He I don't know if he's related to Manti Te'o, but he definitely has a lot of admiration, and their families know each other. And it looked like it was one of those kids that if he was offered, he would commit to Notre Dame right away. And then there were some kind of questions whether or not he was a natural take for Notre Dame, but now there's some questions whether or not he's actually fully comfortable going to Notre Dame. Now, whether that's academic related or just kind of fit related, who knows, but it looks like it's going to come down to like Notre Dame or Iowa there.
All right, so before I let you out of here, I know we've talked about some recruiting, but let's talk a little bit about, I haven't gotten really the opportunity to talk to you about, like actual football in a while. Not that recruiting isn't actual football, but I think you understand what I'm saying. Things that are happening on the field, I suppose. So, I really haven't heard from you. You were at the Temple game this weekend. What was your major takeaway with, everything that went on, whether it be the new stadium, whether it be the on-the-field product, offense, defense, what really stood out to you quickly?
Yeah, so I kind of tweeted out some stuff after the game ended, and that was before I got to watch any film review on the game. So, I think my take was similar to most people. I thought that the energy of the team seemed a lot, different than in past years. I mean, especially on the defensive side of the ball, it just looked like there was or I guess even on the offensive side of the ball, there was like a sense of urgency on both sides. And, you obviously saw the up-tempo offense, but then you saw guys, I think Drew Tranquil said it best today when he said that I don't think they were out of position most of the time when they were missing tackles. And there were definitely some missed tackles involved, especially in the linebacking core. But they were in the right position, and maybe they had an over pursuit, or just didn't wrap up properly and different things like that. But the fundamentals really stuck out to me. I think that it was one of those games where most people thought it was going to be closer than 49-16, I think was the final, but it certainly was. There's improvements to be made, but you could definitely see the talent level, and then the coaching kind of turn into what you need there.
Yeah, I think you hit on something that I talked about a little bit in my article as far as like the missed tackling from the linebacking core. I saw so many people after the game talking about how the linebacking core didn't play really that well, and at first I kind of didn't really believe it, and then I taped the game, went back, watched it, put some clips together, that type of deal, and really I found, I wrote a piece, and, this is me plugging my piece for, over at goldendomerdaily.com, but, I wrote a piece, and I put some of those clips in there, and there are 5 or 6 clips of just missed tackles, and I had more to choose from. Let's just put it that way. I guess the good thing is that what we saw was people like Rue Martini, Niles Morgan being able to diagnose plays. It's just that they weren't able to finish them, and when you're out there playing your first game of the season, Notre Dame Stadium, you feel like you've got something to prove off of a 4-8 season. Obviously, there's going to be some butterflies, some adrenaline, and I think that played a little bit of a part into it. But I definitely think that, the same thing's going to happen when SEC opponent Georgia rolls in. They've been talking a little bit of smack, but I argue a little bit less than the smack that Temple was talking, to be honest. I think there was more humble smack than Temple's was. But I don't know. I'm a little bit concerned, I guess, because I just Georgia's going to be better offensively. Sony Michel and Nick Chubb are going to make them pay a little bit more than Raekwell Armstead, who I actually think is really very, very good in his own right, and some of the other Temple backs and receivers. But I think that this is going to be a big challenge, and I think it's going to come down to the final plays of the game. To be honest with you, I don't see either team necessarily pulling away because Notre Dame is going to have a hard time on offense as well with Georgia's elite type defense. That being said, I know that Notre Dame is favored by 6.5 points, and obviously the whole idea that Jacob Eason is not going to be playing, and they're playing a true freshman quarterback, has Notre Dame fans excited about the possibilities. What is your outlook on the game? Like, what does Notre Dame have a legitimate shot? How much of a shot should they truly be favored in this game? I all questions that I legitimately have for sure.
Yeah, so I'm kind of in the Jake. I'm on the Jake Fromm bandwagon to a certain extent. But there is something to be said for him being a true freshman, and I think both sides of that are being overblown. I think some people are kind of tooting this horn a little bit too much, and then I think some people are not giving him enough credit. So I think it's going to kind of be somewhere in the middle. I was reading something today that said he did not make a single pass last game against Appalachian State that was considered like down the field. Like everything was very short, and that's what you do with a freshman. But that's not going to work as well when you're facing a team of the caliber of Notre Dame, and when you're versus an Appalachian State who in its own right is a very good program, but it's still not on the same talent level. So I think in order for them to win the game, or for Georgia to win the game at Notre Dame, it'd be a little different if it was in Georgia, but I think he's going to have to demonstrate the qualities of being able to throw the ball down the field. And that's sort of like the big question mark with him. Outside of him not doing it in the Appalachian State game, he's kind of known as a guy who doesn't have an elite arm, but is accurate and can make, like the throws he needs to make to win at the college level, but he can't necessarily stretch the field. And I think as a true freshman, you might have to stretch the field a little bit more than he's going to be able to do. So after listening, I think when I listened to your podcast with Jack earlier, you guys kind of had a lower scoring game. I think it's actually going to be a little bit higher scoring. I think my prediction was like 37-29 Notre Dame. I don't know if it's going to be an 8-point spread like that, but that's certainly a close game. I mean, obviously it's one possession. So, but I think Notre Dame's going to be able to score, and I think Georgia's going to be able to score, and I wouldn't be surprised if both teams are over 30.
Yeah, I agree with you. Did you watch Georgia and App State at all, by chance?
I wasn't able to. I saw some highlights, but just being at Notre Dame for the first time in several years, I kind of was taking in that a little bit more.
Absolutely, yeah, that's very fair. I didn't watch it live. I tape recorded it and watched it back, and your assessment of he didn't. I think he had like one down the field throw for 20-25 yards. That was shortly after he came in, and it was kind of like a busted coverage by Appalachian State in the first place. But most of his throws, they were short, 5-yard outs. Or one thing that Georgia likes to do is get their tight end involved. They have a really good pass-catching tight end named Isaac Nada, who I've been keeping an eye on, and he had no targets. I mean, Jacob Eason only threw, I think, 3-4 passes, but it didn't look like he was really even looking for the tight end. And then Fromm came in, and like 3 of the first 4 balls that he threw were to this tight end. So that's a guy. He's number 18. They ran a nice little kind of like Tim Tebow, like pop pass type of a thing to the tight end that was real impressive. I think that's going to be a guy that Notre Dame fans are going to want to keep an eye on, is how Notre Dame covers the tight end. And I think in that 4-2-5 type alignment, they're going to have, a good chance, I guess, to cover the tight ends because they're going to be able to throw some different personnel at him, whether it's, you line up the safety over top of him or you line up even the rover position over top of him, depending on, where the ball is and that type of thing, or a linebacker as well. But for the most part, it was 3-step drops, and even the guys that were calling the game were saying, and Tommy Tuberville was one of them, he was talking and he was saying how the coaches for Georgia basically said that Fromm knew about 50% of the playbook. So I imagine that Georgia's probably putting in, as we speak, pretty much a package of plays that he knows really well, and also trying to bring him up to speed so that they can, not be completely limited. But I think the keys of the game are going to come down to, how well they can stop the run. Can the linebackers finish plays and make tackles? Because those plays that you should have had Reichwell Armstead in the Temple game for no gain, that you allow them then to go for 8 yards, like that can't happen against Georgia. So if they can clean that up, I think they have a good shot. I was actually surprised to see that Notre Dame was a 6.5-point favorite, but I guess that's what a dominating performance and then losing your top quarterback is going to do to a spread like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it probably it would have started out around 3 or so if it wasn't for Jacob Eason getting hurt. But yeah, no. And one thing I want to mention with the linebackers real quick before we get out of here, I think it's fair to say, like, in a first game, like, I mean, not necessarily jitters like some people are suggesting, but just the fact that you're playing like actual tackle football for the first time in a while, because you're not tackling your own players. I mean, you have to be safe in practice and various different things like that. But yeah, I think it's fair to assume that their tackling will be a lot better after having that first game under their belt. Now, obviously, they're playing a much tougher opponent in Georgia in terms of athletic ability, and like Brian Kelly said, the two running backs there are definitely of NFL caliber. But I'm going to make a bold statement and say that Greer Martini's player of the game, because I'm a huge Greer Martini fan, and I was very upset with people getting on him as much as they did, even though he did have a very poor game for his standards.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it wasn't getting on Greer Martini as much as I was impressed with Tavon Coney. Like, I tried to look for a play where Tavon Coney was bad or played poorly, and I really couldn't find one. Now, there were a couple for Greer Martini, and like I say, I was looking for it, so that was what the piece that I was writing was going to be about, so I had a unique eye on it. I didn't notice it as much during the live broadcast of it, but that's something in and of itself that's a little bit different. But anyway, so I was gonna say something and I forgot. So, but anyway, so I think that like you said, this is going to be a interesting game. I think. Where does it sit in your opinion as far as like most important games of the Brian Kelly era?
Well, outside of Alabama, I think it's the first SEC team he's played, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So I think in the South, depending on who you talk to in the South, it's certainly going to be one of Notre Dame's biggest games. But they're certainly accustomed to playing top programs. I mean, obviously they play Stanford, USC every year. They play good Big Ten schools every year, Michigan State. I mean, they've played Alabama in a national championship game. They've played Florida State. They've played Clemson in their houses. So it's certainly in that tier. But in fairness, I think Georgia's had a lot of the same problems as Notre Dame's had in the last 10 years, where they might have a 10-3 team, or but then lose like those 3 games that that make you like that top program, like in Alabama. They lose in the SEC championship game to Alabama all the time. They lose, to a top program that they play, and that's sort of been Notre Dame's problem. So it's certainly up there, but I think it is a step below playing like Clemson, who just won the national championship, or Florida State, who won the national championship very recently as well. And then even, just national powerhouses like a Michigan, who, like Notre Dame, the tradition is very important in that program. So I would say it's behind Clemson and Florida State, specifically in recent years, if we're going to go that way.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I don't view it as like this all important like national championship type game. I mean, we may look back on it, I suppose, and maybe feel differently down the road, but I don't think it's quite as important. I know that some people are really I don't really even know how to say this. I know that some people are maybe even overhyping it just a little bit. Obviously, it's a top 25 matchup between an SEC school and Notre Dame. It's exciting. It's in prime time, but Notre Dame's been on this stage before time and time again. As far as importance, I don't think it's any more important than some of those other ones, but I think what is going to make it really important is, getting an actual win. That would be nice at some point to win one of those big games, because in reality, it probably hasn't been that long. I mean, I think back to 2015, USC in October was kind of a similar type stage, and they won, but it just seems like it's been forever since they've won it. They've won a game like that. So I think that's what makes it kind of important. So regardless.
And in Georgia, I think it's like their first time going north.
Yeah.
Whatever line you want to put it at, like it's their first time going north in like since 1960 something. Right?
Yeah, I think it was 65. Yeah.
So, I mean, when you really think, when you put it on that scale, maybe it's a little bit more important because of just kind of the nature of the SEC never really traveling, and I think that's kind of like the qualm that a lot of people have with that. With that conference is that they're kind of this hyped conference that's the best in the country, but they never really play anybody in their place unless it's down south, or they play at a neutral site, somewhere down south. They never travel to Notre Dame or Michigan or Ohio State. So I think that part will make it interesting. And that's why I think you see so many Georgia fans coming out. They haven't really had the opportunity to come to a program like Notre Dame, or to a school like like Notre Dame, and kind of see that tradition. So I think partly the whole idea that there's going to be like 20,000 Georgia fans in attendance supposedly, I think that kind of overhypes it, kind of like what you were saying.
Yeah. To your point a little bit, the only game that I can think of where an SEC team came so far north was LSU coming north to play Wisconsin. I think that was the beginning of last year. It feels like it was years ago because of what we had to endure with 4-8 last year, but that was the opening weekend of last year, I think. So the one thing that I'll just kind of leave I'll leave with this. Georgia, I watched the Appalachian State game. Georgia didn't look quite as dominant as I thought they were going to look, especially running the football. They ran for something like 220 yards, which is a good number, but this is my favorite thing to point out. Like, it seemed like all of those yards came on like 3 or 4 carries for the most part. Georgia, they went 3 and out 2 straight times to start the game against Appalachian State. And then I think they picked up 1 first down. Jacob Beeson gets hurt, and then I think they punted on the series after that as well. So I didn't look at Georgia's offensive line and think to myself, man, Notre Dame's going to have a tough time with these guys. I did look at the running backs and think, wow, those guys are, Sony Michel turned a nothing into a 44-yard run at one point in the game. So I don't know. I think if Notre Dame takes care of business and they limit the big play in both the run and the pass game, and they force Georgia into field goals and things, I think, that's a recipe to win the game for sure. And that's why at this point I think I'm, if I had to make a prediction gun to my head right now, I think I would go Notre Dame in all truthfulness, because I just think that they're going to be able to do that. And I think that they're going to be able to make, you referenced it earlier. Obviously, they say that you make the biggest improvement from week 1 to week 2. That's because you haven't played football against another team in college football for a really, really long time. And I think that's kind of where that comes from. So I think that Notre Dame's going to do that. At least I hope they do. I'll be in attendance on Saturday night. I, paid a pretty penny for those tickets. The face value for that ticket was absolutely absurd. It's like $185. I like had the ticket in my possession before I knew how much it was going to cost, because my uncle gets them from being an alumni and then he sends them to me. I was like, I really owe you that much money for these things? I might have rethought. No, but in all seriousness, it's going to be a big game. It should be fun, and hopefully it ends up in an Irish victory for sure.
That's why I ended up going to the Temple game, is the price of the ticket. We were originally thinking about Georgia.
Yeah. I mean, I have the benefit that my fiance lives in Mishawaka, Indiana, so I don't have to pay for lodging when I go out there, so I can afford to reach a little bit for some of those better tickets and things. But yeah, so anyway, any final thoughts before we close?
Real quick, I just wanted to mention I mentioned him very briefly when we were talking about the guys that were going to be in attendance, but I didn't mention that he would be on an official visit. But Houston Griffith, who I think many Notre Dame fans know as a guy that, at least at one point was kind of seen as a Notre Dame kid, and has kind of faded in the last in recent months. He kind of announced in the last few days that he was going to be in attendance as well, which was sort of a shock. And he said something today or yesterday where he was like, I don't know why people thought I was off Notre Dame. I never said I was off Notre Dame, and I speak with their coaching staff all the time, every week. So he'll be there, and I think I think his biggest concerns were with the defense. I don't think he wanted to play for Brian Van Gorder. And seeing how Notre Dame played this past week, I think opened up his eyes a little bit, whether he wants to admit it or not. And so if they put on a good show, I think that Notre Dame might be in the mix for a top 100 recruit at a crucial position of need. So I think it's important that we highlight Houston Griffith as one of the most important visitors this weekend.
Sounds good. All right, Nate, thanks for joining us for this episode, of the kind of the recruiting emphasis here at the beginning. Glad that we got to talk a little bit of Notre Dame and Georgia football here. Obviously looking forward to the game Saturday night. Like I keep saying, it should be a fun one. Listeners, make sure that you subscribe on iTunes, check us out on SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, all of those places. If you're on iTunes, go write us a review. Check us out online on Twitter at NDDomerDaily. Instagram as well, same handle, and make sure that you're over checking us out, most importantly, at goldendomerdaily.com and finding all of our good writings and things. Well, we're going to have some fun stuff coming out here in the coming days, and we've got one game under our belt as far as season coverage goes. I think we've done a pretty good job, and we're only going to continue to get better over there. So continue to check us out, continue to support. For those of you who do support, we really appreciate it, and until next time, go Irish.